From blaming referees for doing their job, to claiming an opponent tapped out when they clearly didn't, some UFC fighters come up with the wildest theories after losing. Let's check out the fighters who used the most ridiculous excuses after a match. Starting off with the fighter who used one of the oldest excuses in the books. Yep, you guessed it. I'm talking about the time Paulo Costa blamed wine for his embarrassing loss at UFC 253. The rising star had secured a championship matchup with middleweight king Israel Adesanya after cruising to 12 straight victories. The unbeaten Brazilian was sure he'd be the one to unseat the 185-pound champion, and he wasn't afraid to say it. But as soon as the action started, fans found out that Costa's bark was worse than his bite. Adesanya dominated in the ring throughout the 2 rounds. And just 3 minutes into the second match, the last stylebender delivered the precise blow which knocked the lights out of the Brazilian fighter.
Go to the leg again. Oh! Knocked down for Adesanya! Costa trying to recover! That is it! Still undisputed! Quick knock!
Adesanya then had one of the rudest celebrations ever witnessed in the octagon. The Kiwi boxer humped his knocked-out opponent from behind. He was probably inspired by the countless jokes made before the match. But if the celebration wasn't embarrassing enough for Costa, fans couldn't stop trolling him for weeks after the match. And he ended up uploading a 13-minute video to YouTube saying that he wasn't at his best during the fight. As if we couldn't tell. But it's his iconic excuse for being drunk during the match that made the headlines all over. He was trying to get sympathy. Instead, he got roasted all over social media. Costa received a barrage of criticism for his reckless behavior, and eventually put out a public statement on Instagram asking people to abstain from drinking, while holding a glass of wine himself. But at least blaming the alcohol is better than blaming the referee for the match, because Dominic Cruz had it out for the referee at UFC 249. After suffering an embarrassing defeat by Henry Cejudo, Cruz was not pleased.
Everybody, thank you so much, man. I'm Triple C's out. You guys don't have to hear my ass no more.
Well, thank you, sir. It's been an honor to call your fights. Henry Cejudo, ladies and gentlemen.
And I get it, nobody likes to lose. But claiming a referee smelled of alcohol and cigarettes is a whole other level of crazy. Cruz pointed his finger squarely at the official for the stoppage during the fight, as well as the odor. He even went as far as to say that the referees should get drug tested before each match. But while Cruz wished he could have someone like Herb Dean officiate the match, Antonio Nogueira was the exact opposite. In UFC 92, Minotauro Nogueira fought Frank Mir for a chance to face Brock Lesnar, who was the champion at the time. And as the overwhelming betting favorite, fans were expecting him to dominate in the octagon. They expected him to go on to win the UFC championship. But when fight night came around, Mir was in beast mode. Nogueira had no idea what hit him. The fighter from Las Vegas delivered punch after punch to score the knockout win against Nogueira. So when the two finally had their rematch years later, the Brazilian fighter was ready to redeem himself, and he started off the match strong. Big Nog tagged Mir with elbow blows before dropping him with a few piercing blows. All the while, his opponent struggled to defend. But just as it looked like the match was about to end, Nogueira decided to go for a guillotine choke. He was trying to finish off in style, but all he did was give Mir a chance to escape and get the upper hand. Mir caught his hand in a Kimura during the chaos, and applying all of his strength until his opponent's arm was broken. The Brazilian said he went for the choke because he wanted a stunning submission victory. Just a week later, he changed his mind, admitting that the referee, Herb Dean, told him his punches were illegal. But at least his reasoning wasn't based on complete delusion.
I locked up the armbar, and he actually slipped his elbow out. But I wanted to transition to a triangle, which was to get to my head to the other side. So when he went to lift me up, I just...
Since Alistair Overeem claimed that Stipe Miocic tapped at UFC 203, and apparently he was the only one to catch it in a stadium filled with thousands. Overeem didn't have the greatest of starts to his UFC career, but after being inconsistent for a while, he finally got a championship opportunity against Stipe Miocic at UFC 203, and he came very close to winning the most desired title in mixed martial arts. That too, in one of the most action-packed single-round fights in the promotion's history. After dropping Miocic with a straight left, the Demolition Man used a guillotine choke, but the champion was able to pull through by resisting the submission attempt and standing up right away. It's from this point that the momentum quickly changed. Miocic wrestled Overeem to the mat before landing a barrage of punches to earn the TKO victory. But after it was done and dusted, fans couldn't help but wonder how Overeem lost that quickly. He explained during the post-fight interview that he released Miocic from the chokehold because he felt the champion tap. But when Joe Rogan saw the replay and exposed his lie, things went from bad to worse for Overeem.
Right now, his guillotine is nasty. Miocic in huge trouble.
No, he's not. Not
He's
anymore.
out. And he's chasing Overeem down.
He's still wobbly though, Mike. He's still wobbly.
After seeing the recording, it was clear that Miocic did not even attempt to tap, and that Overeem had been lying all along. The Dutchman was booed as he left the octagon in Cleveland, Ohio, the hometown of the winner, and his reputation took an even bigger hit than he did during the fight. But he wasn't the only delusional fighter to enter the octagon. Karo Parisian blamed his amazing skills for his embarrassing loss. Now, there's no doubt that Karo was a top-tier welterweight during his time, but according to him, the reason he lost to Thiago Alves at UFC Fight Night 13 was that he was too talented to train for the fight. Alves, who was climbing the ranks quickly, defeated the Armenian-American by a technical knockout in the second round. Parisian admitted that he wasn't fully recovered after the bout because he was used to winning matches without putting in much effort. He'd quite literally never met an opponent good enough for him. But he got a wake-up call after that knockout and realized that his rivals were catching up to him. For many fighters, not taking training seriously is a real problem. So the fact that Karo was able to get away with him for so long shows how bad his previous pairings were. He isn't the only fighter resorting to insane excuses. And Conor McGregor's balloon foot excuse tops it all. Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov have one of the most heated rivalries in the history of the UFC. Any match between these two is guaranteed to bring in a crowd, and UFC 229 wasn't any different in terms of viewership. But instead of watching a match between two top fighters, millions of spectators watched a lopsided beating. And while many UFC enthusiasts loved watching McGregor lose in the octagon, it was a bit surprising. With his grappling and unending ground and pound attacks, Nurmagomedov went for McGregor. In the end, the Eagle kept the title after forcing the Irishman to submit in the fourth round.
Leg over the back ankle of
Let's see if he can get back up to his feet. It's one of the
Hunter's head so that he can't move.
Better equipped to handle 5.
Lifting your heel up. It's just different how he holds you there.
A year later, McGregor claimed that he suffered an injury before the bout, refusing to acknowledge that the champion simply outmatched him. The Irishman said that his foot was so severely hurt that his toes had begun to come out of their sockets because his foot was swelling like a balloon. If his meme-worthy attitude wasn't enough, fans started trolling him all over social media after this excuse. And considering he was stamping his feet hard while being introduced before the fight, he wasn't really supporting his case either. Conor knows how to do everything but take the L. Well, there you have it. These were the fighters who used the most ridiculous excuses for losing.